الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, continue reading that which the author she had mentioned, حفظها الله تعالى, with regards to تربية الأولاد. And we have been reading the portion in closing this chapter, what the author she's mentioning with regards to showing mercy and kindness and having love and affection in dealing and raising the children. She's mentioning an issue specifically now about the daughters, and she mentions حفظها الله تعالى والإحسان إلى البنات وقاية من النار كما قال البخاري رحمه الله حدثنا أبو اليمان قال أخبرنا شعيب عن الزهري أنه قال حدثني عبد الله بن أبي بكر أن عروة بن الزبير أخبره أن عائشة رضي الله عنها زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حدثته أنها قالت جاءتني امرأة. She says حفظها الله تعالى that and showing kindness and being good to the daughters is a means of protection and a shield from the hellfire, is a wiqaya min an-nar, meaning a protection and a barrier and a protection from the hellfire, just as has been narrated by Al-Bukhari. And she mentions his chain to Urwa ibn Zubayr, that he heard from Aisha, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that she said, radiyallahu anha, a woman came to her one day with two daughters, and she was looking for some food, meaning she is begging and asking Aisha radiyallahu anha for some charity, for some food for her and her daughters. But she did not find anything with Aisha radiyallahu anha except for one date, meaning that this woman, she's poor, miskina, and she's coming with two little daughters, and she's looking for food for her and for her daughters. And she comes to Aisha radiyallahu anha to ask, and whenever she comes, Aisha, she doesn't have any food in her home except for one date, and therefore she gave it to this woman. She says, فَأَعْطَيْتُهَا فَقَسَمَتْهَا بَيْنَ ابْنَتَيْهَا. So she says, so I gave her that one date, and that woman, she divided that date in half and gave it to her two daughters. ثُمَّ قَامَتْ فَخَرَجَتْ. And then she got up and she left. And meaning the woman who was asking for the food, she got up and she left. فَدَخَلَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَمَ فَحَدَّثْتُهُ. So she says now, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, just after this, he came in, and I told him of that which happened. فقال من يلي من هذه البنات شيئا فأحسن إليهن كن له سترا من النار. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he informed her now, saying that whoever takes authority, whoever has authority and guardianship over these daughters, whoever has any type of authority or guardianship over these daughters, and he does well and he's good to them, then they will be a means of protection from the hellfire. كُنَّ لَهُ سِتْرًا مِنَ النَّارِ يعني حِجَابًا مِنَ النَّارِ. They will be a barrier guarding that person from the hellfire. So she says now, وَأَخْرَجَهُ مُسْلِمٌ. And also this same narration is collected by Muslim. So therefore the hadith is muttafaqun alayhi. In our previous class, we were discussing the narrations that the author she mentioned, and there were a number of them in Sahih Bukhari. And we had mentioned the chapter titles that those narrations were in to benefit from that understanding. Likewise, this narration here is in the chapter of manners, and many of those previous narrations were likewise also in the chapter Bab Rahmatil Waladi wa Taqbilihi wa Mu'anaqatihi, the chapter of showing mercy to the child and kissing him and hugging him, yani showing love and affection. So this narration is in the book of manners in this chapter here about showing mercy to the children by kissing them and hugging them and the likes like this. And we have seen likewise that this was from the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and many times he would set the children on his lap or he would hold them and the like sallallahu alaihi wasallam and comfort them. And even sometimes he would joke with the younger children and play with them and make them laugh and comfort them likewise by being kind to them. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So this is a great encouragement for this affair, especially here with regards to the daughters, that the one who has daughters, rather it's even more general, the one who likewise has sisters, or even somebody who has these young girls under his care and authority, and he takes care of them properly and he raises them correctly and he makes his best effort to take care of them. He makes his best effort to raise them upon the deen and take care of them and spend on them and the likes, then they will be a means to protect him from the fire and the anger of Allah Azza wa Jal. This issue here has been narrated in a number of narrations by a number of different companions. And Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, in Fath al-Bari, in the commentary on this narration, he mentioned a number of other narrations that are similar, clarifying this issue. So here, the issue now is about the one who takes care of the girls, raising them, whether they're daughters or whether they're sisters or even others from the relatives, and that one he has authority over them. It has been narrated by Salama radiallahu anha in one narration about this affair. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, "Man anfaqa ala ibnatayni aw ukhtayni aw dhatay qaraba yahtasibu alayhima," until the end of the hadith. The one who spends on two daughters or on two sisters or on two women from his relatives, and two girls from his relatives, and he's hoping for the reward. يَحْتَسِبُ عَلَيْهِمَا, looking for the reward and also disciplining them and making sure that they are upright upon the legislation of Allah Azza wa Jal, then they will be a means of protection for him from the hellfire. And in another wording likewise, it's been mentioned, فَصَبَرَ عَلَيْهِنَّ, and he was patient in dealing with him. Patient in dealing with him. And he mentioning all these different wordings, clarifying what is intended from raising and taking care of the daughters until they will be a means of protection and a shield and a barrier for that person from the hellfire. So in another wording, likewise, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, فَأَنْفَقَ عَلَيْهِنَّ وَزَوَّجَهُنَّ وَأَحْسَنَ أَدَبَهُنَّ. And the one who takes care of these daughters, sometimes it's mentioned 2, other times it's mentioned 3. And the likes. And here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, whoever spends on them and gives them off in marriage, and he works very good and well in disciplining them and teaching them and educating them, then this will be his reward. And till the end of the hadith. Also collected from the hadith of Jabir, it's mentioned that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Man yu'wihinna wa yarhamuhunna وَيَكْفُرُهُنَّ," yani the one who gives them refuge and the one who gives them protection and shelter, and he taking care of them. We see there's the mention of spending on them and taking care of them, raising them, disciplining them, also protecting them, also seeking the reward from Allah Azza wa Jalla with regards to that, also being patient with regards to disciplining them, being patient with regards to raising them, being patient with regards to taking care of them. All of this is a requirement in order to reach this great reward. وَيَكْفُرُهُنَّ yani taking charge of their affairs and looking after all of their affairs, physical, financial, and likewise spiritual, yani in the aspect of the religion, which takes precedence and is first and foremost. No doubt to clothe them and to provide housing for them and to provide proper food and sustenance for them and to take care of them in this manner, and also to educate them, especially the education that will benefit them, the true education, which is the Islamic education, the education which is from the Quran and the Sunnah and the understanding of the Salaf of this Ummah, the education which we were created for, the knowledge which we were created for, to know Allah Azza wa Jal and to know the path that leads to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to know how to implement that in one's life, Also in another wording by Abi Sa'id radiallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, فَأَحْسَنَ سُحْبَتَهُنَّ وَاتَّقَى اللَّهَ فِيهِنَّ, meaning, and also along with that, he had good companionship with them, and he feared Allah in their right. And he feared Allah in their right, then he will have this reward. كُنَّ لَهُ سِتْرًا مِنَ النَّارِ. There will be a means of protection for this person from the hellfire. So this is with regards to the daughters, but also with regards to the sisters. Also, with regards to anyone who has other relatives who are girls or women under his care, and he looks after them in this manner. He looks after them in this manner, fearing Allah Azza wa Jal in their right, striving to take care of them and to raise them and to discipline them and to educate them and to discipline them and to educate them upon the proper path, the correct way, upon the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, being patient in dealing with their shortcomings or their faults, being patient in dealing with the affairs that one faces in the path of raising daughters, and the likes like this, and making great effort to spend upon them until they are old enough to get married, and then after that searching for the proper husband, and the likes like this on behalf of them until they are married and taken in marriage. At this time, this is the means. So this is the means for this great reward. There will be a means of protection from the hellfire for the likes of this person. The point from this narration is to clarify the great virtue of raising daughters, because many people, no doubt, they love to have boys. They love to have boys, and the boys, they are beloved because of the great benefit that comes from them. But likewise, here we see the Prophet ﷺ has specifically encouraged the raising of daughters as well, and mentioned the great reward with regards to that. The great reward with regards to that. So this is a great narration. Also, Al-Bukhari, in the book of Az-Zakat, he mentioned this narration under the chapter titled Babu Ittaqullaha walau bi shiqqi tamra, the chapter that you must fear Allah even if it's with half of a date. Even if it's with half of a date. And this is exactly what this woman is doing. She preferred her daughters over her own self. She's coming begging. She's hungry and her children are hungry. She's hungry and her two little daughters are hungry. But she found nothing except for one date. So she preferred her daughters in the situation, and she split it in two and gave each one of them half. So this is also a display of a great mercy and showing preference and love for the children even when one is in need themselves. Also, we see the virtue of Aisha radiallahu anha, that even she had nothing herself except for this one date, and she showed preference to this woman and her daughters. And this is something that made Aisha amazed, and not the fact that she gave the charity, but whenever she gave this charity, whenever Aisha radiallahu anha, she gave this charity to that woman, all that she had was one date. Then that woman, she took it, and instead of eating it herself or sharing it with her daughters, she split it in half and gave one portion to each of her daughters. So Aisha radiallahu anha, she thought this was an amazing affair, how this woman showed great precedence and preference and love for her daughters in this manner, until the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam entered and she mentioned this affair. Not mentioning about her deeds, but mentioning the amazement of that woman, how she showed preference and gave precedence in the right of her two daughters. So the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned this narration, that whoever has authority, whoever has some type of authority over these daughters, over these little girls, and he is good to them, then they will be a means of protection from the hellfire. كُنَّ لَهُ سِتْرًا مِنَ النَّارِ. Sitr yani al-hijab. Al-hijab is like a veil, a curtain, yani meaning that it's something to protect. It'll be a means to protect that person from the hellfire. So although Aisha radiallahu anha, she only had a date, also she herself, she showed precedence and preference to others. In this case, that she gave up her very last date for this woman and her daughters, showing great virtue and kindness and showing great mercy and hoping for the reward from Allah. So the author, she says now, حفظها الله تعالى وقد كان أهل الجاهلية إذا رزق أحدهم بنتا فهو بين أحد أمرين إما أن يبقيها مهانة حقيرة وإما أن يدفنها في التراب. In the times of Jahiliyyah, and from the people of Al-Jahiliyyah, meaning in the times before the coming of the messengership of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and whenever one of them would have a daughter, he would find himself between two options. Either he would keep the daughter along with him in disgrace and in humiliation, or else he would bury the daughter alive in the dirt. Bury the daughter alive in the dirt. And this is something that was well known in the time of Jahiliyyah. From the traits that some of the Arab they had is that they found having daughters to be a shame, to be something that is shameful and a disgrace. And if one of them, if their wife gave birth to a child, and whenever they found out that it was a female, they would become very sad, and they would become upset and grieve much, and they would think which one of these two affairs they would do. If they keep the child, if they keep the little girl, then it will be a disgrace and a shame for them. And if the only way out from this is for them to bury the child alive. And this is something that some of them, they used to do. So she says, إِمَّا لِأَجْلِ الْعَارِ مِنَ النَّاسِ كَمَا قَالَ تَعَالَى, either because it was something considered blameworthy from the people, meaning if a person, he had a daughter was born for him, then he's afraid that people will accuse him and blame him and find fault with him and put him down. Just as Allah, He mentioned in His book, وَإِذَا بُشِّرَ أَحَدُهُمْ بِالْأُنْثَى ظَلَّ وَجْهُهُ مُسْوَدًّا وَهُوَ كَظِيمٌ يَتَوَارَى مِنَ الْقَوْمِ مِنْ سُوءِ مَا بُشِّرَ بِهِ أَيُمْسِكُهُ عَلَى هُونٍ أَمْ يَدُسُّهُ فِي التُّرَابِ أَلَا سَاءَ مَا يَحْكُمُونَ أَلَا سَاءَ مَا يَحْكُمُونَ. And whenever the news of the birth of a female child is brought to any one of them, his face becomes dark and he is filled with great grief and worry. He hides himself from the people because of the evil that he has been, because of the evil information that he has been informed of. And whenever he finds out that his wife gave birth to a female, to a daughter, this is how he would feel. So he thinks, shall he keep her with dishonor or bury her in the earth? Allah, He says, certainly evil is their decision. So then she mentions now, وَإِمَّا يَدْفِنُهَا مِنْ أَجْلِ أَلَّا تَطْعَمَ مَعَهُ, or else also they would bury the child as well in order for the child not to eat along with them. So there were a number of reasons why they would bury the child in this manner, either because they were afraid of being blamed and out of shame and the likes like this, or because they were afraid that the child would take from their food and from their wealth and their property. وَإِمَّا يَدْفِنُهَا مِنْ أَجْلِ أَلَّا تَطْعَمَ مَعَهُ, or else he would bury the child because he would not want that child, that girl, to eat along with him, and to take from his provision. كما في الصحيحين من حديث ابن مسعود رضي الله عنه, just as is in As-Sahihain from the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud رضي الله عنه. He says, سئل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أي الذنب أعظم. سئل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أي الذنب أعظم. قال أن تقتل ولدك خشية أن يطعم معك. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was asked, which sin is the greatest? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that you kill your child afraid that he will eat along with you, and you're afraid that he will take up one's provision and sustenance. This narration here, as she mentioned, is muttafiqun alayhi, and actually it's a portion of a narration. And in Sahih Bukhari, Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu, he says himself, سألت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أي الذنب أعظم عند الله أي الذنب أعظم عند الله. He says, I asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which sin is greatest with Allah? قال صلى الله عليه وسلم أن تجعل لله ندا وهو خلقك. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, it is that you set up a partner or rivals with Allah and worship while He is the one who created you. قلت إن ذلك العظيم. Ibn Mas'ud, he says, رضي الله عنه, I said at this time, indeed this is something that is major. Indeed this is something that is very great. قلت ثم أي. And then I said to him, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and then which sin after that is greatest? قال صلى الله عليه وسلم أن تقتل ولدك تخاف أن يطعم معك. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said that you kill your child, afraid that he will eat along with you, and you're afraid that he will eat from the provision that you have. Afraid that he will eat from the provision that you have. قُلْتُ ثُمَّ أَيْ. And then Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, he says, and then after that, which sin is the greatest with Allah? قال صلى الله عليه وسلم أن تزاني حليلة جارك. أن تزاني حليلة جارك. And he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, after that, the greatest sin is that you commit fornication with the wife of your neighbor. With the wife of of your neighbor. So this is a major affair likewise. All three of these affairs. Allah, He is our creator, provider, and sustainer, and then one, He will call on others besides Allah. And some wordings of this narration with regards to the first and most major sin with Allah, and تَجْعَلَ لِلَّهِ نِدًّا وَهُوَ خَلَقَكَ. And some wordings the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and تَدْعُوا لِلَّهِ نِدًّا. And this is what it means, that you call on another along with Allah. And you supplicate and invoke others besides Allah. وَهُوَ خَلَقَكَ. And He is the one who has created you. And He is the one who has created you. So this is a major affair. This is a major. فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَعَظِيمٌ. He said, radiallahu anhu, indeed, this is something major. This is something very great. The shahid is in the second affair, that you kill your child afraid that he will eat with you. And you're afraid that he's going to take up your sustenance and you may go poor or in poverty or experience great hardship in sharing your wealth and your food with this child. So therefore one is afraid of this affair, and then this would lead him out of greed, وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ, to kill the child. As for the last affair, that one he will commit fornication with the wife of his neighbor, this is likewise a major affair. And no doubt to commit fornication in itself is a major sin, but it becomes more disgusting and more hideous, more repulsive and more severe with Allah Azza wa Jalla whenever it's performed in the manner like this, whenever it's performed with someone who has great rights over you. So the rights of the neighbor in Islam are very great, and the rights of the neighbor in Islam are something that is very important. And the neighbors, they have great rights with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala regardless of their affair, regardless of whether they're believers or non-believers. They could be relatives, they have the right of the relative, and they could be believers, they have the right of the believer, they could be non-believers. Then they have at least the right of the neighbor. So if they're relatives, they have the right of the relatives and the neighbor. If they're believers, they have the right of a believer and a neighbor. Even if they're non-Muslims, they have the right of a neighbor. They have the right of the neighbor. And the neighbor in Islam has great rights. So to go even so far in harming the neighbor by committing fornication with his wife, now it becomes more severe. And the sin becomes greater. And likewise, the threat is also more severe. وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ. So these are all three major sins. And one wording in Sahih Bukhari, Ibn Masud, he mentioned, وَنَزَلَتْ هَذِهِ الْآيَةُ تَصْدِيقًا لِقَوْلِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ. And this verse here was revealed, testifying to the truthfulness of the statement of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, whenever Allah He says, وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ وَلَا يَقْتُلُونَ النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ وَلَا يَزْنُونَ. That noble verse from the description of Ibad ar-Rahman, the true slaves of ar-Rahman, that they are those that they do not call on others along with Allah whatsoever. They do not supplicate to anyone along with Allah whatsoever. They do not invoke and call on anyone along with Allah whatsoever, nor do they take the life of a soul without right. And also they do not commit fornication. They do not commit fornication. Again, committing fornication is a major crime, and to do that in this manner, like in the narration with one's neighbor, or the people of not, as they mentioned, for example, with one's relatives or one's maharim, وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ, it becomes even more severe and more severe, and the crime is greater, and the punishment likewise is greater. وَلِيَذُ بِاللَّهِ. So she says, حفظها الله تعالى, فجاء الإسلام وبين منزلة البنات وشد أزرهن ومن ذلك ما يلي. So therefore Islam has come to clarify the status of the daughters, and also to emphasize their right. And from that is that which is to proceed. Now she mentions a number of points in the end of this chapter with regards to the virtue of the daughters and raising the daughters, and some rights of the women in general. Inshallah, we take them in the class to come. هذا وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.